otherwise judge such a thing. And of course, given the fact that your own vote doesn't count in any sizable jurisdiction, uh, why would you invest any time to gain the knowledge and understanding that's required to judge the pronouncements of the politicians? So there's bad incentives, and there's this impossible objective of being a truly educated voter who you know who's reading the federal budget, understands the federal budget. I mean, it's government is so opaque and so complex and so involved in so many things that it would just be impossible to be uh, someone who was up on every issue and could judge candidates. You'd also have to study political philosophy and on and on and on. On this point about one vote not counting, this is just simple arithmetic. I know some people get offended by this. I presume this crowd here won't, but I've talked about this many times before, and people will get outright mad at you if you suggest that their vote doesn't count. But it's just math. Okay, it's one, any sizable jurisdiction, your vote is like a drop in the ocean, and it's not going to make a difference. In fact, Gordon Tullock, great economist, great person, great theorist who showed had a great theory of government failure, one of the founders of the Public Choice School, unfortunately, who just died a couple of weeks ago. He said you have a better chance of being killed on the way to the polls than of affecting the outcome of an election. So at this point, let me bring in the Jonathan Gruber story because it dovetails so well. Jonathan Gruber is a MIT professor, considered an expert in health policy, helped to devise Mitt Romney's healthcare plan in Massachusetts when Romney was governor, and then was a very significant consultant and highly paid. Apparently, got something like $6 million over the years. He's gotten $6 million from different government agencies, being a consultant and writing reports. He was involved in the architecture of the Affordable Care Act. Uh, Very important person. Recently caught on video saying that Obamacare passed because of the stupidity of the American voter and the lack of transparency about how it would be funded. And of course, this now this is the classic definition of a gaffe, right? It's when you say something that is either true or something you really believe, but it's impolitic to say it publicly. That's the definition of a gaffe. And so that's what happened here. Here's one of the elite saying we only passed this thing because American voters are stupid, and the process is not is so untransparent that nobody outside could have figured out what was going on. Of course, the Obama and Nancy Pelosi and all the people who were involved in getting this bill passed are running around now with their hair on fire. For the first tactic was to say we don't even know who this guy Gruber is, and that fell away because there's ample evidence that Gruber was a close confidant of Obama. Uh, Obama cited him. Nancy Pelosi cited him. Everybody knew who he was, but they acted like they never heard of the guy. They said, "I don't even know the guy." So that fell apart. And then they just called him stupid for saying that the American voter is stupid. The issue actually is not stupidity. I mean, Gruber uh, should have picked another word if he was going to really be honest. It's not a matter of stupidity. It's a matter of lack of incentives to become educated, and the fact that the government is very, very good at creating opaqueness, so that you can't penetrate the veil and see what is exactly going on. There's a great book on this subject by Charlotte Twite that I'd like to recommend called Dependent on DC. And she has a marvelous theory of how government raises the political transaction costs so that it's very difficult for the average person who's busy making a living and raising a family to, number one, figure out what the government is doing, and number two, reacting to it in some effective way if the person happens to figure out what the government's doing. So you get these two barriers to understanding and change, and that's why she calls those political transaction costs. Number one, the government can make sure you don't know what's going on, and like I said, try reading the federal budget sometime or any bill. Don't forget, Obamacare was 2,200 pages, and and even that understates how opaque it was because so many of those pages were not what the Obamacare was going to mean, but was directions to the Department of Health and Human Services or other agencies to write rules about particular things. So in other words, the rules themselves were not passed by members of Congress. It was just authorization for executive agencies to write the rules. So if you read the bill, if you read the 2,200 pages in their entirety and paid good attention and really absorbed it, you still wouldn't know what the bill was going to mean once it was passed, which is why Nancy Pelosi said back during the days it was being debated, we won't know what's in it until it's passed. Now, it's really funny for her to be denouncing Gruber for saying what he said when she herself said, we won't know what's in the bill until it's passed. In other words, it is transparent and the American people can't know. But the only thing I would correct is it's not a matter of stupidity. Anyway, I think this ties in with the Jon Stewart point because he doesn't want to make fun of voting, but look what a joke voting and the results of voting are, and yet his very minor act of humor he had to apologize for. Let's go a little deeper in Stewart's background. It was only in 2009 when he called Harry Truman a war criminal during a conversation with a noted neoconservative. And the reason he called him a war criminal is obviously the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki toward the end of World War II in 1945. Now, that statement was actually not satirical or ironic or flip. It was just the unvarnished truth. Truman's victims threatened no one. These were civilians, Japanese civilians. The war was essentially over, yet those civilians were subjected to the most ghastly fates. Some were vaporized on the spot, literally leaving only their shadows behind. I'm not exaggerating here. And don't forget that Truman dropped the second bomb 3 days later, so one bomb wasn't enough. And he considered dropping a third, but he decided at that point that he didn't want to kill any more children. So reading about what the victims experienced are sure to turn your stomach. But nevertheless, Stewart recanted a couple of days later on his program. He said, quote, the other night I may have mentioned during the discussion we were having that Harry Truman was a war criminal. And after saying it, I thought to myself, that was dumb. And it was dumb. Stupid, in fact. So I shouldn't have said that. I did. So I say now, no, I don't believe that to be the case. The atomic bomb, a very complicated decision in the context of a horrific war, and I walk that back because it was, in my estimation, a stupid thing to say. Sorry. Close quote. Stewart did not explain or bother to explain why the statement was stupid. He likes that word, apparently. He called his voting remarks stupid. Or why Truman's decision was complicated. That's what every Truman apologist says. He didn't elaborate. What was complicated? What was complicated about it? But we know what Stewart meant. In America's civic religion, it is heresy to talk about an American war as though it was a massive series of crimes committed by our leaders. You must not say that. Actually, that's not it. You must not think that. 2 and 2 is 5. Never forget it. Yes, it is permissible to say that the war in Vietnam, never World War II, however, was a blunder, a colossal mistake. But don't say it was mass murder and a humongous criminal operation. Don't say the perpetrators should be brought to justice. Noam Chomsky did that and was thenceforth barred from publications that had regularly published him, like the New York Review of Books. It is a rare mainstream publication that would let you say that Bush 43, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Powell, Rice, Tenet, Petraeus, McChrystal, et al. Should be hauled before the International Criminal Court to stand trial for their wars of aggression against the people of Iraq and Afghanistan. Has Nuremberg been erased from the history books? I should also point out Stewart's fawning obsequiousness before court historians like Doris Kearns Goodwin and courtiers like former Secretaries of State Madeleine Albright, Hillary Clinton, and Henry Kissinger. You can look those up. Google Jon Stewart, any one of those names, and watch the videos. See how he treats these former secretaries of state. Every time they publish a book, he brings them on and fawns over them. He had Kissinger on a couple of years ago when Kissinger had a book out, and he just greeted him by saying, "Doctor, doctor, 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 please sit down." And it was disgusting. Actually, it was rather sickening. So getting back to, by the way, regarding fawning about Henry Kissinger, Hillary Clinton, who is a presumptive presidential aspirant, is reviewed over the last weekend, reviewed in the Washington Post, Henry Kissinger's latest book called World Order. I recommend it to you to see what Hillary thinks of Henry Kissinger. It's going to be the subject of my op-ed tomorrow, so you might want to watch for that at fff.org. Getting back to Stewart and voting, his remark was actually pretty lame. I think I said some of this before. All he said was that he couldn't vote because he didn't know where the polls were. He didn't say he was happy about that. Here's what he could have said. Did I vote? Of course I voted. Would I pass up a critical opportunity to add my one single drop of water to the vast ocean? Why, every vote counts. Had I stayed home, the whole country, heck, the whole world might be different. You must be crazy to think I'd let that happen. That would have been satire. But it also would have struck too deep at America's civic religion, which holds that trudging faithfully to the polls every few years is the be-all and end-all of freedom. That voting majorities by nature must violate the rights of voting minorities and non-voters is curiously overlooked. In fact, you better not say that. In fact, I always like to say, in democracy, the majority rules and the rights of the minority are protected. I submit that those two things can't both be true. Okay, pick which one you want, but they both can't be true. What I wouldn't give to see Americans' reaction, the looks on their faces, to Emma Goldman saying on television, if voting changed anything, they'd make it illegal. Excuse me, but I grew up watching George Carlin, supposedly Stewart's hero. So call me spoiled, but Jon Stewart is the George Carlin, what Joe Scarborough is the H.L. Mencken. Here's how Carlin handled politics. Quote, I don't vote. On election day, I stay home. I firmly believe that if you vote, you have no right to complain. Now, some people like to twist that around. They say if you don't vote, you have no right to complain. But where's the logic in that? If you vote and you elect dishonest and incompetent politicians, and they get into office and screw everything up, you are responsible for what they've done. You voted them in. You caused the problem. You have no right to complain. I, on the other hand, who did not vote, who did not even leave the house on election day, am in no way responsible for what these politicians have done, and have every right to complain about the mess that you created. Now, can you imagine, any of you who are George Carlin fans, imagine him ever apologizing for such a statement? The very thought is I mean, it's unthinkable. You can't really form the thought. So I leave you on this note. George, where are you? We need you. I will stop there and throw things out for conversation and questions, and let's have a good discussion about this.
All right, if you have questions, you can ask them in the little Q&A box in the upper right. Um, in thinking about, Jon Stewart in particular coming up to this event, Jon Stewart, I enjoy his comedy. I watch occasionally, not that I have a whole lot of time for TV, but anytime it gets to a serious issue where he has a chance to actually bite at the administration, I've always been disappointed. And it's hard, like, I don't want to say I don't like Jon Stewart, because I still do like Jon Stewart, but he's stuck in this he's stuck in a system and in a mindset that so many people are stuck in. Do you have any thoughts on how we can